Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and Dark Dry Drew here. Today is Thursday, January the 3rd, 2019. It's 4 p.m. New York time, 1 p.m. in Los Angeles, 9 p.m. in London, and 8 a.m. in Sydney, Australia. Welcome, wherever you are listening around the world, to this edition of LOA Today. Whether you're listening to the live stream or listening to the recorded podcast, either way, we're glad to have you here. And we're seeing a few people already coming into the comments section, so this is both a topic, but it's also a Q&A, so feel free to type in questions if you're listening to the live stream, and Drew and I will do our best to answer them. And Drew, you came up with an interesting topic idea last week. I think you kind of did it inadvertently, but I entitled it, "You want me to give up my smartphone? You want me to turn it off? Are you crazy?" As a way of symbolizing the fact that millennials, especially, a lot of people today, but especially millennials, are just kind of like I think they're like glued to smartphones. I mean, is it true that they sleep with them in their hands? I mean, I'm kind of guessing, but.
Yeah, I mean, that, from my experience, I'm starting to see it with adults more too, where you're starting to notice these effects, like people saying, I can't really watch movies anymore. My attention span's not there.
Ooh,
and they're like a 50-year-old, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, it's because cell phones are one of those things where they're so new that we don't really know the effects that happens when you have one every day.
This is true.
Especially because they're always changing, too.
You know, I was thinking about the role that smartphones are playing in today's culture, and it occurs to me that in a sense, especially given all of the attention that's been given lately to the idea of smartphones as the equivalent of a drug or an addiction, in a sense, a smartphone is a way to do the same thing that any other addiction is for, is to escape pain of some kind, whether it's mental distress, emotional, psychic, physical, whatever it might be. But it's an escape mechanism, isn't it? It's a way to get away from whatever is bugging us and just hopefully feel a little bit better for a while.
Yeah, definitely. And we touched on that last week with the idea of sort of these different escapes, and I totally agree. And cell phone provides many things. I know that for me, one of the things was it took me years to realize that most of the notifications were like total crap. Like 1 out of 300 emails is actually important for me. The rest I can just look at later or not even look at all.
Right.
And same with the text messages, where most of the time it's like, oh, this is just some other person throwing their crap at me. You know? Mm-hmm. Very rarely is it like essential to my life. And so I realized just even shutting it off for a few hours, it's sort of like that same sense of peace from meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. That makes sense. In fact, I shared with, who was I sharing with? I think it was with family over the Christmas holiday that you had mentioned that, I think you'd recently invited some friends to play a board game with you, and one of the rules of the board game that you added in was you have to turn your smartphone off while playing the game, which I thought was an interesting rule. I never really considered that one to be something that millennials might do. But then I also discovered, talking to our nephews, that actually apparently board games are fairly popular among millennials, which kind of surprised me given the age of video games on phones and things like that. Is that what your experience is, or do you see your own experience as being more unusual?
Well, so I love board games because I'm like naturally a strategist, so that's stuff I just love it. Mm-hmm. And that can be fulfilled through video games, but the reason that I like board games more is that, well, one, you're not staring at a screen for hours.
Right.
Two, you get to interact with other people, and I think that's really where, with a board game, you can feel the vibe in the room. And so when everyone's super into it and it's super intense, and the board games nowadays are a lot different than like, Monopoly and stuff like that. Like the one we were playing recently was a game where you're a bunch of colonists during a zombie apocalypse and you're trying to come up with the right amount of medicine and the right amount of supplies and the right amount of this and that, while at the same time going out exploring and salvaging things. And so it was super intense because we had this group of, it was like all four of us had gone to university, and then here we couldn't beat this board game, $40 on Amazon. And so it's kind of it's like a humbling experience, you know, and you've got 2 engineers and 2 math majors and none of us can beat this game. And I think that that's something that you can't really get in a lot of other areas of life. That's, to me, it's just amazing. But the whole cell phone part, if someone has their phone out, it totally tanks the vibe. It's sort of like this circle of energy around the table, and then someone gets on their phone, and then the next person gets on their phone. Yeah, it kills it, really. Especially if you're playing like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of game where everyone is role playing a character, and then one person's on their phone. It's like, what do you do? And I think for a lot of people, they don't even realize they use their phone that much. Because to me, I remember when I was in a relationship, my then girlfriend would want to text me and stuff, and I'm like, look, you can either come over and visit me, or let's just, not be around each other today and not text. Like, wherever I'm at is where I want to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there, And so I'm not trying to text, like, if I'm at a board game night, I'm not trying to text my friends and, like, ex or whatever. But, like, you know what I'm saying, where a lot of these people kind of lose track of that. And so for me, I'm like, all right, no cell phones at the table. But, and most of my friends are like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Every once in a while they might want to check it. But then one of them, it was pretty troublesome. He was kind of like, what? What do you mean? I'm like, yeah, can you do it for 2 hours? You just graduated from university, you're an engineer, you're a bright guy, I'm sure you could do it. And it's like, no, a lot of people cannot. It was like watching him tear his hand off or something, it's part of him.
It almost sounds like withdrawal from a drug.
Yeah, oh, totally, yeah.
I mean, because if you're that attached to it, it means that, well, first of all, you've probably forgotten what human contact is like, which I think was the point that you were making with your friends, that let's make this a human contact thing when we're playing the board game. It isn't the board game that needed the smartphones off. It was the humans who needed the smartphones off.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So So there's a certain withdrawal aspect that, like withdrawing from a drug. But I also appreciate what you're saying about the value of maintaining that contact, and when somebody gets onto a phone, it just kind of breaks the circle. Another way of saying it is, it's almost as if the person who's getting on the phone is being disrespectful to the other people who are in the room. It's like, you don't count.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's hugely disrespectful, but a lot of times they don't see it that way, And that's sort of where the problem comes in. Is that
my wife and I are not...
I think a lot of... What's that?
I was just going to say, my wife and I are not much on using our phones. We use them pretty rarely. I think I will access my phone maybe twice a day. That's about it, and for about 5 minutes at a time. But inevitably, we'll go out to dinner, and in the process of being at dinner, one of us will raise a question and neither one knows the answer to, like a trivia question or something like that, or what's the meaning of, or what's the origin of this, or whatever. And so we'll reach for the phones to look it up to see what the answer is. And while we're looking at the phones, my wife will say, now we've joined the 21st century. We're sitting at the same table and we're looking at phones.
Yes. And I try and, I make exceptions for it. Like I have a folder for all my thoughts, a folder for all my jokes, a folder for my film ideas.
Right.
Like I'll write that down in my phone, but then when I have the ability, I'll try and write on paper. The phone definitely, or like with the camera, I'll see Mimi on the couch or something, and she'll be, a cute little dog on the couch. I'm like, I gotta get a picture of that, But otherwise, just trying to kind of detach from it. That's sort of it. It's now at the point where the phone provides so many essential functions that you have to like really have the critical thinking skills to look and figure out which ones are non-essential and cut them out.
Right.
Because if not, they'll lag down your life. But that takes a lot of effort to really figure out what actually matters in any aspect of life.
Yeah, no, it's true.
That's sort of where I've been lately,
That's true. We got a couple of comments I wanted to share, too. Nasha says, I was on the train from Lucerne to Interlaken, Switzerland. It was a scenic train ride, and what was strange was that people were taking pics and uploading. And I had my phone in the bag because I wanted to record it in my mental smartphone, which is my brain, which I thought was a really cool concept because, if you're taking all your time, I remember that from when before smartphones, we took cameras, right? We would take pictures with cameras. And when you're taking pictures all the time, you're not actively engaged in whatever the enjoyable activity is. You're just kind of on the outskirts of it because you're constantly messing with, okay, well, how's the technology work so I can get the right photo? So I'm with you, Nash. I like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's something I've thought about, because I remember the first time I ever went to a concert, I tried filming a bunch of it, and then I realized by the end, like, that was kind of a bad idea. So I was trying to figure out the balance for that, because I know for me, like, as much as I'd love to only take mental pictures, I'm 22, and I've already forgotten, like 80% of my life, unless I see something to remind me of it. And so that's where, what I've been doing, because I go to a lot of concerts, is because a lot of people just hold their phone out in front of them, and it's sort of this obnoxious eyesore to everyone else. So what I'll do is I'll just hold it to my chest and hit the record button, and then I'll still be in the moment watching the show. I'll get like a 4-minute clip. When the song ends and when they're retuning in between songs, I'll stop recording, put my phone away. Okay. That way I'm only, not immersed for 10, 15 seconds.
Well, that's the other thing, because with the smartphone, you can take video. It used to be you were limited to still photos. And, a still photo is like, okay, well, set up the photo, take a shot, okay, we're done. It didn't take all that much time. So you could still have time left over to enjoy whatever it was you were there for. In fact, I would enjoy it so much. I actually forgot to take photos most of the time, so I don't have a whole lot of photos of my life. But, even if there were times where I was taking photos, it was, 2% of the entire time period. It wasn't very big. Today, video, it could be the entire event, whatever the event is.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of those other questions you have to kind of figure out your life is like, because I know for me, when I look back, I only need like one definitive picture of an event to be like, oh man, and I can think of all of the memories. Or even, this is really cool too, so I've been journaling for probably started journaling in 2012 to 2014, somewhere around there. Mm-hmm. And so I've been doing it for years now. And it was one of those things where like early on it felt like a bunch of crap. Like, I remember this. I even remember this stuff from a year ago. Why did I write this down? But now that it's been so many years, it's like, oh my gosh, like reading some of the memories brings me back to the moment. And the more I'm trying to be even more descriptive now when I write down what I do each day. Because then looking back at some of the stuff that I kind of blocked out, there's sort of the areas where like a lot of good things happen in your life, but a lot of bad things happen. For me, the bad things sort of just wiped that whole section clear. So like most of my relationship was good, but a lot of bad things happened during that time. I don't really remember a lot of my relationship. But I went back and read like a section from just some random day, and it was a different experience than just having seen a picture. Having 19-year-old Drew describe it. It brought me like a 3-dimensional memory that I could feel, I could see it, I could hear it.
Right.
And that was just the coolest experience because it does not happen like that with pictures and videos. So I mean, reflecting and writing, it's one of those things where in the moment it's kind of a drag because you're like, this was today, like I'm just writing down what I did today. But then 5 years from now, it's like, oh my gosh, I did not remember what I did.
It's a good idea.
January 17th, 2015, but now I do.
No, it's a good idea. I know that it takes time to journal, and that's probably the biggest obstacle to actually getting it done. But I love the fact that you do it. And in the process, you create a record of yourself, that you can reference at any time. That's a good idea. I mean, if it were me, I know I would never have done it anyway. But I commend you for doing it. I think it's fabulous that you're doing that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and it's become more enjoyable with time. And then I thought it was funny when everyone's like, that's so creepy. Kavanaugh has his calendars and he knows what he did every day. And I'm like, hey, wait a sec. I do that too. It's not just the creepy weirdos. It's just people that want to remember their lives.
Well, that's just it. And it does kind of reflect what your priorities are. I mean, we saw what Kavanaugh recorded, and we know what his priorities were, but your priorities don't have to be his. Your priorities could be actually something more wholesome, more desirable, more interesting, more fun, more life.
Yeah. That's how I try and frame it. I don't write down the crappy things unless they were like like monumental ones, you know, like monumental crap is important to remember because it's a learning lesson and it's a benchmark by which to compare future life experiences. If that's, you know, how you perceive the world, is how it is for me.
Especially given the nature of popular culture, news, politics, entertainment, even religion. I mean, so many different areas that are just so inundated with negativity. Anything that we can do to bring a positive spin to stuff, a positive perspective, I think is great. So, I think you're doing a good thing. I mean, Paul actually made a comment too, agreeing with it. She says there's a motivational speaker named Simon Sinek, I believe it is. He talks about such a lot how the phone is an addiction for many. And she says his clips are on YouTube. So, there's an example of how it has become a big topic about smartphones. But I like the idea of coming up with alternative ways to live, to record life, to interact, and learning how to take our attention away from the smartphone. Except when we're watching LOA Today. That's okay. Listening to the podcast, that's good.
Yep. Got to make exceptions.
You got to make exceptions, right. So, keep tuning into that. But the rest of it, turn it off for a while. How's that for a mixed message? Let's see. Do we have any questions going on here? Oh, Nasha says, that's why I'm not on Snapchat. I just feel we miss out on the fun because we want to see the beauty. Well, I believe the beauty is when we enjoy and live in the moment. The memories in the brain for me just flash in front of my eyes. So reinforcing what she said before. That's good.
Yeah, and that's, you gotta suss out what you like and what works and all. Because, like for me, my friend and I were kind of talking about this. So I'll set a goal. Like my goal is to go to college. Now, in the pursuit of that goal, I ended up, maybe a year or two into college, coming up with new goals that I wanted to work on.
Right.
But then when I graduated college, I kind of lost track that was a goal I had set, and so it didn't feel like it meant much to me. Then I had to look back and kind of give myself validation. I fulfilled that goal, because a lot of times he and I, my best friend and I have basically the same personality, and so we'll feel like a total failure like all the time. Ooh. Until we actually look back, and it's like, oh, we set this goal, and we actually completed it. It's just that on the way to completing that, we set more goals, and that's what our focus shifted to. Mm-hmm. And this is the topic. We could do a whole episode on this, because this is just, it was bewildering to me to kind of look at it. Self-validation.
It fits in with what we were talking about before, about how we're just inundated with all this negativity. We are almost all of us are creatures of habit, in the sense that we will just kind of by default react to whatever's going on around us. And when what's going on around us is largely negative, we develop a largely negative mentality. So, of course, when it comes to trying to remember what good things happened, if most of the time we're focusing on the stuff that we don't like, that good stuff is going to kind of slip away. We're going to not notice it. And that's why it's so important to do things like what you're doing with your journaling, to find ways to make sure that we pay more attention to the stuff that's good, because there's actually a lot of good stuff in life. Life is largely a very good thing. There's a lot of great experiences, there are a lot of good people, a lot of good things happening. We just have to take the time to notice them and to enjoy them and to kind of drink them up, milk them for all they're worth. Yeah. And when we do that, then what happens is the brain, because it is so habitual, will over time relearn. Instead of focusing on all that negative junk, it'll start focusing on this positive stuff, because we keep going back to the positive stuff. So we actually can retrain ourselves in that sense, to the point where now all of a sudden the stuff that we're remembering is the stuff we want to remember, which is kind of cool.
I guess that's sort of the journey I've been on, is like that reframing. And I know for me it's like literally restructuring my brain. Like when you're a kid, you have a few blocks, and then like adults give you building blocks. Then when you become an adult, you're like, whoa, some of these building blocks aren't as great as I thought they were. You have to like literally tear your world apart and restructure the way you think, amongst other things. Pretty odd feelings.
Yeah, that's true. But it is a restructuring. You're basically saying, I don't like the way this other structure is working. I got to tear it down and start again. And so you do.
Yeah.
the nice part is that the
Yeah.
restructuring is also a creative endeavor. It's a creative activity. So you get to create whatever you want the structure to be. And you don't even have to know in advance what it's going to look like. You can just kind of create on the fly as you're going, which is fun.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great way to look at it. That's kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, drawing from different influences. The
Yep.
more influences you draw from, the better.
And
Get the best aspect of each.
oh, I got to thank Nasha. Nasha's really one of our number one fans, I'd say. Maybe the number one fan, because she says the podcast is the best thing about technology. So thank you, Nasha. We appreciate that.
Oh, well, I hope that
And Bronwyn agreed. She said that's so true. She says that she loves watching and learning. So fabulous. we know we're doing the right stuff if we're doing that. We're getting that kind of reaction. So thank you, ladies. That's great. I was looking at Reddit.com today. I'd been kind of exploring and experimenting with the idea of taking some of the negative junk that's there and bringing it down to the show and translating it, pivoting it over to a positive. And as I looked today, there was really nothing I wanted to bring over because I was noticing a pattern. I was noticing a very definite pattern. The pattern was people were putting out what they considered to be humorous. But the humor, I can't even say it was dark humor. I mean, you like as a comedian and as a screenwriter and so forth to engage in dark humor. I wouldn't call this even dark humor. It was angry humor. And there was a lot of it. A lot of really anger-based humor. People laughing at, this really, really bad thing I'm so angry at, and I'm going to make a joke out of it. And, I'm going to belittle this thing, or I'm going to, tear this thing or this person down or whatever. And I thought to myself, whoa. I mean, I don't even want to go near any of that stuff. But boy, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's in every single Reddit post I was reading. And so I combined that with our topic being, all the time that people spend on smartphones and, how difficult it can be to put down the smartphone. That brought me back to what I started off the podcast saying, which is that, maybe this is a way of drugging. Maybe it's a way of dealing with the pain or the suffering that's going on in one's life. And the idea that people are using their smartphones or their computers to post all this anger-based humor suggests to me, this is their way of trying to get it out. Problem is they actually contribute to it when they do that. But nevertheless, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to use their smartphones. They're trying to use their computing devices to get all this anger out by spewing it out to the world and say, hey, isn't that a great joke? Kind of sad.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a lot of the posts on Reddit stuck because they are just full of toxic waste. And you kind of have to realize that. Because I used it for like a week extensively because I learned a lot about INTJ personality type, which is what I have. And it helped then to be like, oh, I'm not alone. Like, I feel this way. But then it got to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, like these are all kind of things that I've gotten past, but a lot of the people in this Reddit subreddit or whatever, they have not gotten past these issues where they're still kind of cold and heartless and elitist and all of these things that are sort of inherent in the INTJ personality type. And so, the toxicity, I think part of the problem is that with Reddit, you find the subreddit that's so specific that when you do post some sort of humorous thing, but it's coming from a place of anger, everyone just kind of validates it because you're all in the same group. And so it's like a hate group,
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of the problem. There's a few, because that's the thing is most of the people that post on the internet do not post good things.
That's true.
In regards to commenting. The Law of Attraction has a very positive fan base from the start. You're not getting people going on there saying, this never works, my life's terrible. Or if they do, then everyone else in the group's like, hey, hold up here, let's work on this,
Mm-hmm.
Rather than yeah, you're right, everything's terrible, It's
right.
not just reaffirming your biases.
Yeah, for the most part, that's exactly what happens. You're right. And the fact, I often wonder how many people who are posting the really anger-based humor or the anger-based rants, I wonder how many of them realize, probably not many, but I wonder how many realize that in doing so, they are bringing more reasons to have anger-based rants into their lives.
Yeah, that'd be a great question. I don't know who realizes it and who doesn't, but it's a good point.
I suspect that they don't.
Like,
I mean, because if they knew, they probably would stop
yeah.
doing it. But the fact that they keep doing it kind of suggests, no, they really don't understand that very, very, very basic concept that LOAers know, but most people I don't think really know it. I mean, I did a little informal, not terribly accurate census, so to speak, to find out here in the U.S. how many Americans are interested in the law of attraction. And the way I did it was I grabbed some numbers about how many adults there are in America, and then I compared it to Facebook, and which is not really a fair comparison because not everybody's on Facebook, but there's a significant number on Facebook, so it's not terribly out of alignment. And I went to the ad manager as if I was going to place an ad, and basically put together a picture of all American adults who are interested in law of attraction or The Secret or, some combination of any of that thing. And it came out to roughly about 15% of American adults have an interest in law of attraction. Now, I don't know of the other 85% how many of them actually are aware of the law of attraction and just aren't even interested in it. So I can't really rule that part out. And plus the 15% is going to be a little bit of a soft number anyway because of the way I put the numbers together. But it makes me wonder, of those 85%, I wonder how many of them know. I bet you a large number of them don't know. And what's really interesting is there are probably, I'm going to make a wild guess here because I didn't actually test this. Let's just say a majority of that 85% are probably religious. And since they're in the United States, the vast majority of those are probably Christian. And of those Christians, I would be willing to bet that most of them don't understand that when they focus on all the stuff that they're angry about, they attract more of it. Even though the Bible has a whole bunch of stuff in it, including, the bit about sowing and reaping, which is exactly what the law of attraction is. And that's what's so interesting to me. It's so interesting to me. There are large numbers of people who they just aren't aware of it. And I suspect it's not just the U.S. I suspect it's true worldwide. I was just drawing, U.S. because that's an easier set of numbers for me to pull together. But I suspect it's a worldwide phenomenon. Wouldn't it be interesting if people realize that every time they put the crap out there, they get more of it back?
Yeah, and I mean, that's where it comes to just kind of educating. You can't change the whole world, but if you educate one person and they educate one person, Yeah. Well, plus with these, like nowadays you can leave. Nowadays we're in an age where you can leave sort of like a legacy beyond your own life. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's one of the things that also is like, I think it'd be kind of cool if I documented every day of my life and then like, maybe I make 3 creative works in my entire life that like become very successful and people like them. And then I can like, when young artists look and they're trying to figure out their own path, they think, oh, look at this. Like I can literally know Dark Drudger's entire life,
right?
Like how he got from where he was to where he's going.
Right.
I think that's a super cool idea, especially when so many of the people I look up to have died and no one knows anything about them besides what's been recorded,
What, so
in the same way, this law of
how do you use that information? I mean, you just cited the fact that there's a lot that people don't know about certain people, but you are, you're digging deeper? I don't quite understand what you're saying.
The main idea was that your podcast will be on the internet beyond both of our times. Ideally. Okay. And so that people, 100 years from now could still listen to it. But for me, the other side note, I guess, is that a lot of the creative people or like just people that have been an influence to me, you can't really find much about them because they died. And so they lived in a time where there really wasn't,
and you're saying that's going to change because of the technology. I got it. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like nowadays you can look at someone's Instagram if they're like a creative artist you like.
Right.
And you can be like, oh, like this is kind of a glimpse. And even then it's sort of a filtered one. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm trying to provide I'm creating like this unfiltered, just like raw version of my own life. And I think it's kind of, we'll see what happens. But I mean, it is what it is, essentially.
What do you see the value of it being? I mean, how do you see it all shaking out?
What do you mean?
Well, you're putting this record together, and you're doing so. You're taking advantage of the technology to make it possible for a future generation to know more about Drew. So, look ahead 50, 75, 100 years or whatever. What do you hope they're going to see?
I would hope So my friend Jake and I have a whole bunch of films we want to make before we die.
Oh, okay.
And so my hope is that by the time I'm dead, I'll at least have a few creative works that, I mean, I always just kind of make whatever satisfies me, but I kind of hope to also, like, to set an example for the future. Because I have sort of, I wouldn't call it like a disdain, but sort of like really, this is what Hollywood creates, and really, this is what all the films are like.
Yeah.
And I want to just create, like, really awesome, like Quentin Tarantino, he said, I want to make films that encourage other people to make films. And to me, that was like, whoa, that's me. Like, he's nailed it. And so now I want to kind of continue on with something like that, where it's like, I want to create pieces of art that help people. And I've already kind of accomplished that with the comedy on a low scale of people being like, hey, like, you know, this meant a lot to me, and this helped me get through some dark times. And even if it's just a handful of people, like, it's already warranted all of the effort I've put into it to help just a handful of people. So ideally, by the time I'm dead, I'll have been able to have helped more people and then leave this body of work, regardless of what anyone thinks of it. As long as I'm satisfied, that's all I really care about. And then, because I believe in the message at its core, you know, sort of setting, I mean, I always set immensely high standards for myself. And then I think kind of the background and context of, you know, for me, it's one of those things where you see this creative person and you're like, how the hell did they get there? How do I get from where I'm at to where they're at? And most of these people are dead. Mitch Hedberg is dead. Bill Hicks is dead. Otis is dead. All of these different people that I like admired and was like, man, how did they do that? There's not much info on them. And so I'm like, okay, you know, and I'm sure that some people go, wow, that sounds kind of pretentious or maybe egotistical to assume that your body of work would be, you know, have so much meaning. But just regardless of, even if it was meaningless, that you know, having, all right, well, where did Dark Dry Drew go wrong? And why is his entire body of work meaningless? You know, let's examine his whole life.
Well, also, we could look at it in a more positive way, too. Regardless of whether or not somebody else finds your body of work to be meaningful, you found your body of work to be meaningful. That's actually much more important than anything else. I mean, it's not like I would hope that you're not basing, you know, your success with filmmaking or anything else in your life on what everybody else thinks about it. I would hope that you're assuming that your success is dependent upon how you feel about it. And as long as that's the case and you're feeling good about what you made, that's it. You've succeeded right there. That's the way I look at it. Even no matter what happens with this podcast, and I have great hopes for this podcast. I have great hopes of having, you know, huge numbers of people that we're influencing, and it turns into this real big thing and so forth. But even if it's just where it is right now and it never grows anything beyond this, I feel successful. I feel successful because I know that I put out there the best message I know how to put out there, and that I really believe that the message of positivity is an important message to put out. And I believe that encouraging people to become positive so they can get more out of what they want in life is a good message. And if I'm getting that much done, I feel like I succeeded, regardless of what anybody else thinks about it. And plus I get some great fans saying that, you know, like Nasha saying that she used to pretty much delete everything on Facebook until she listened to the podcast. Now she thinks that technology is a pretty good thing, which is great. I love that. Thank you. That just reinforces for me that we're doing something good here, you know.
And I guess I'll have to kind of work on that through time. But I know for my like personality type that it's hard to be. It took me years just to give myself validation for anything. You know?
Oh, it's so important too. We got to do that. We all have to do that. It's really, I think we should be all spending probably at least 10 to 20% more of our time than we currently do, giving ourselves validation for what we do, giving ourselves credit. Boy, oh boy, I think we would all live such happier lives if we did that, and more successful lives. Just because we took more time to give ourselves credit. Because we deserve credit. Every one of us deserves credit. Everyone listening, you, me, all of the other co-hosts, we all deserve some credit, quite a bit of credit from ourselves. Especially considering the fact of how, really, we are our own worst critics. We're worse on ourselves than anybody else is, for the most part. You know, that's pretty typical of what human beings do. So that makes it even more important, I think, to spend more time giving ourselves credit for what we do. Louise and I try to do it every night. We try to do it just by doing what we call 3 good things. Can we name 3 things that happened today that were good? You know, just a way of reminding ourselves, oh yeah, did some good stuff today. Had good things happen. This was an enjoyable day, or at least parts of it were. Even on the
Yeah,
day,
I like that.
I mean, even on the day when she was in the hospital. She was in the hospital Christmas Eve. Not exactly the best time to be in the hospital. Even then, we were trying to find where the positives were. Did it help? I'll bet you it did. I'll bet you it helped a lot. It turned her heart around.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people look at it like a silver lining, but it's like a morale boost, really.
I think it's actually more even.
Silver lining.
I mean, you're right. It is a morale boost, and that's a great thing. But I think it's more than that. We went to a cardiologist today. She needed to get an EKG so they could update the records and all that kind of stuff. And plus, this particular cardiologist, he's going to have her do an echocardiogram, and so they're just doing all the stuff that they normally do. But in the course of talking to him, we told the story about how she'd been in the hospital. It was Christmas Eve, and on Christmas Eve, her heart stopped and then rebooted into sinus rhythm, so it basically, fixed itself. And he said, well, I don't want to rain on your parade about that being a miracle. And then he rained on our parade about it being a miracle. And I thought to myself, wow, there's a guy who, regardless of what he thinks about law of attraction, I don't even care about that. That's a guy who despite the tremendous success he's had with his career, and he's been very successful. He's a very successful cardiologist. Despite all that, he still has been unable to connect to the joyous side of life. I mean, this was a really great thing. The heart, restarted itself. Now, from his point of view, it was his team and their medicines that restarted the heart. Okay, let's assume that that's it. Why not celebrate that? He wanted to treat it as if it was just ho-hum. I want to treat it as if it's a Yahoo! And there's a big difference there. Yeah. There's a really big difference there. And I just was struck by that. I was struck by the fact that this guy, who's a really nice guy, he's a very, very good guy. You could just tell he's caring. He wants so much for people to live a high quality of life and so forth. But he just doesn't get this one key point. How important it is to celebrate the good things in life. Just amazing to me.
Yeah, I could rant about doctors for hours. I've had very few positive experiences with them.
Well, that's where we have to do what Neville Goddard calls the pruning shears of revision. That's where we have to rewrite it, rewrite the event. So the good part of the visit was he was telling us, if I kind of take the way he said it and invert some of it and leave out some of the negative stuff, what he was telling us is essentially Louise can look forward to just living a normal life. Now, did he say it that directly? No. But nevertheless, that was the message that came out of it. He also gave us the message that there's nothing really to worry about. Even if she goes into AFib again, no big deal. Don't worry about it. Did he say it that way? No, he didn't say it that way, but that was the meaning of it. So what are we going to take away from the meeting? I could take away from the meeting the fact that he was constantly looking for something wrong, and he couldn't spot the miracle when there was a miracle. He denied it was even miraculous, and all these terrible things happen, and we could be on the drugs forever, and all these other things. I could focus on all that, or I could focus on the bottom line message was Louise is going to be fine.
Yeah,
and it really has nothing to do with him. That has to do with what I'm going to take away from it. It has nothing to do with him. It's me. I'm the one who gets to decide it. Which perspective am I going to take?
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, I guess, what you said rings true for me, because recently I was there's sort of the coming to terms with my IBS, and then what I've gotten to recently is more the appreciation. Because everyone will go through hardship in their lives. I think it's easier when you're young. It'll certainly be more damaging, possibly, because it's sort of during your critical development phase. But because I was looking back on it, because I was like, man, I really did solve more in 6 months than any of the doctors, the GIs, the therapists, all of what they tried, and also my experience in college of being around the people that would become those people also made me realize they're no different than anyone else.
Yeah.
In fact, the only difference to me is that they're willing to do something they hate, which is all these classes and schoolwork for years, and not have any fun, and fully dedicate themselves to the singular purpose.
Right.
You had all these people that's hey, do you want to hang out? We're going to do some board games. And they're like, oh, I've got the internship and I've got 30 hours of this, and it's like, what are you going to look back on? You have no memories outside of this convergence to being a doctor.
Well, you better find something to enjoy in it. Otherwise, you're right. It's going to be pretty empty by the time, 10, 20, 30 years passes. Because you're going to look back and you're just going to say, well, okay, so was it worth it?
Yeah, and for me, looking back, I guess the way you're describing it, reframing it. So early on with the diagnosis of IBS, they told the one doctor in specific, like, she was just bad. She was a bad doctor. She was too elitist and too subjective, but thinking she was objective to be a good doctor. And she basically told me that there was no cure for my problems, that it was in my head, and that was just the way I was. And so as a young kid, I became pretty nihilistic and had no drive to try and fix the issue, because if the doctor told me that there was no fix, then to me it was nothing. So for 10 years, essentially, this just delved into nihilism, and because that was not optimistic nihilism back then. This is just nihilism.
What you're calling nihilism, I would call it victim energy. You were a victim. You were playing the role of the victim.
I guess you could call it whatever. As a young kid, I had no drive to try and fix it, because to me there was no solution. I was told that there was no solution by someone I was supposed to respect.
Yeah.
And so there was no difference between eating healthy or eating bad. I kind of lost any interest or respect for the sciences and for like health stuff. It all kind of seemed like a bunch of BS, because every time I would eat like vegetables or something, I'd get horribly sick. And so, that was 10 years essentially. Mm-hmm. And I'm at the point now where I'm appreciating it, because it was just a continual test of hardship of being sick for 10 years, of social isolation, of having to deal with annoying people. Or even, and I might have even mentioned this one before, but I remember when I was a resident advisor at UC Davis, it was the training, the first 2 weeks. And one of the days was sensitivity training, to be sensitive to other people's background, disability, anything about them.
Right.
And at the sensitivity training, I could not eat any of the food that they had catered, because they had not asked anyone outside of, I think they had like a vegetarian section.
Okay.
So here I was trying to be open-minded to the sensitivity training that this team of 7 coordinators made, and then I could not eat any of the food because they did not have the sensitivity training to ask if someone could not eat the food they were providing.
Right.
And so that was like instantly, it tanked my entire respect for the group, where I'm like, really, this is your this is your program. Yeah, it kind of frustrates me to this day, because it's so damaging to young people to have stuff like that. And it's sort of something that I had to accept over time, that like a lot of people, even when they think they're trying to be sensitive and when they think they're trying to be good, they're not exactly, because they haven't been educated in those ways. And so for me, I'm getting to the point where I'm appreciating my medical issues, because it's an opportunity to educate people and to help others that have gone through disability. But that was not the case for the past 9 years, really. Only now is it kind of getting there where I'm like, oh my gosh, like all along I thought I had a curse, but really it's just an opportunity to become the best I can through this, and then to help others. So
when you were talking earlier about how very often you don't really remember the good things that happen, is that partly because of all the memories you have about this kind of thing, this experience, this 9-10-year experience you had, that was largely a negative experience from your perspective? Do you think that experience kind of crowded the other out, so to speak?
Yeah, that, and a mix of that, and well, a lot of stuff too. Like, just not. For the most part, I don't really like. I can connect with people on a basic level, but I very rarely deeply connect with someone, and it helps to read that they're like, for INTJ personality type, relationships will be the most challenging aspect of your life, partly because they're irrational and your brain functions in logic and reason, and so you won't be able to understand them, and furthermore, you won't connect with many people. So it's like, okay, that has helped me come to terms with the fact, there's a challenge. So all of that was a problem, like early in college and stuff, and then I was really sick and suicidal for like a year to 2 years. And then I lived with like sociopathic housemates for a year. So there's a bunch of stuff that like it sort of did crowd out those memories where I was so entrenched in darkness that all the good stuff was harder to remember. And I'm now looking back at some of it, it's sort of like, you have to kind of get through some wounds to get to that.
Would you like to try something to reverse that tendency?
Sure.
Okay. This draws directly from Neville Goddard, but there are other teachers who have similar things that they teach. But I'm going to do it along the Neville Goddard way. This is what Neville calls the pruning shears of revision. What we're going to do is we're going to take that experience you just described, and then we're going to revise it as if it happened the way you wish it had happened. In other words, we're going to try to take that negative series of events, the negative experiences with the doctors, the negative experiences with the other RAs and the trainers in that RA session and so forth. We're going to try to take all of those different experiences and replay them, retell the story, so to speak, as if they were played out the way you wanted them to play out, as if they had actually happened the way you wish they had happened. Are you game for trying that?
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the doctor. Okay, the first doctor who told you. I don't remember exactly what she told you, but you basically have to live with it. It's all in your head, that kind of thing. Okay. So what was that doctor's name?
Hooten.
Dr. Hooten. Okay. So you're with Dr. Hooten. Okay. What is it you wish Dr. Hooten would have told you instead of that? Let's play it out as if she had actually said this other thing that you wish she had said. What would have made you feel like it was more worthwhile? Go ahead. Sorry.
Probably more along the lines of like you're going to have to take all of this in your own hands and like, this is not an issue that doctors can fix, but this is something that you will have to figure out on your own and solve in your own way.
Okay. What else?
I think validating the actual level of hardship that it is or that it would become, rather than sort of being like, oh, it's all in your head.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So saying, yeah, you're really experiencing something.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? What else do you wish that Dr. Hooten would have said if it had played out the way you wish that it had played out? What else do you want her to say?
I think just the general the general idea of having a more supportive vibe to the whole thing, of being like, I think that was part of it, was that it didn't feel supportive at the time. So finding a way to have worded all that in a supportive way.
Right. So more empathy.
Like, hey, like, yeah, more empathy. Yeah, definitely more empathy.
Mm-hmm. Can you imagine her kind of changing her behavior pattern in your mind? Can you imagine her as somebody who is an empathetic personality? Can you reimagine her, so to speak, like you were writing a script?
Yeah.
What does she do differently? Does she smile? Is there a way that she talks? Treat it like you're writing a script. What set the scene for us? What's the new scene like?
I'd say that rather than just giving an answer immediately, taking a step back and kind of being like, you know what, this is a bummer. This is going to be a tough time, but you've got this. But you're going to have to take it in your own hands here. It's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a tough journey, but it's your journey. That's something that no one else can really kind of do for you. I think just that would have been like that's all it would have needed to be.
So you didn't really want her to be somebody to say to you, this journey will last as long or as short of a time as you decide it's going to be, because it just depends on how much you put of yourself into it. You wanted to know it was going to be a long journey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. If that's what you wanted, that's what you wanted. That's all right. So that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So play that scene out. I mean, I know I already had you do it, but do it again. Replay the scene and take her role and have her talk to you the way you would have wanted her to talk to you, with all these elements now we've pieced together.
Okay. Be like Drew, like this is, I understand that what you're going through is a challenge. Doesn't really make sense. There's not very much information to go on. No one really has an answer to this. The closest thing to an answer is within yourself. The issue's not inside your head, but the answer is. But you got to find it, and it's going to take a very long time through a lot of hardship and a lot of suffering to get there. But when you get there, you'll hopefully be able to look back with a sense of appreciation that it ever happened in the first place.
Okay. So let's now imagine that's actually what she said to you, okay? Now you're looking back 10 years later. How does that feel?
I think it definitely feels more validating.
Yeah? Mm-hmm.
It's more of a sense of peace than a sense of like frustration or anger.
That's a nicer vibration.
Yeah.
Much more pleasant.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of activity.
Yeah, because what it does is it takes a lot of the sting away from that really, really negative experience that you had. Just by playing it in your mind as if it played out differently, it's almost like you're erasing the old and putting the new in its place. And in the process of doing that, you're taking the sting away, you're taking the stigma away, you're taking away that negative tape that just kept playing over and over in your head, and you're replacing it with a new tape. And it doesn't matter if that's what was true. What matters is you're replacing the tape so that the tape doesn't haunt you anymore.
I like that. I'll have to experiment with that more.
And oh, by the way, the more that you do that, interesting things happen that I can't quite describe, other than to say you will find over time that your recollection about what happened changes. And you will even get results that change. So what used to be X happened and produced result Y, now it's X prime happened and it produced Y prime as a different result. And I know that sounds strange, but that actually will happen if you keep doing this activity of replaying that the way we just replayed it. Rewriting it, the pruning shears of revision, as Neville calls it. Let's do the same thing with the resident advisors, with that RA meeting, right? Where you were, it was a sensitivity meeting. Redo that meeting, replay that one, but write it the way you want it to have taken place.
I guess, given, are you just changing their responses or changing the actual scenario?
Both. Change the parts that you wish were changed. Okay.
I think what I would have done differently is I would have gone and told them straight up, like, hey, here you're having a meeting about being sensitive to people's issues, and here you did not ask if everyone could eat the food that you're providing at the sensitivity meeting. And they would have gone, oh my gosh,
oops.
How, we apologize for this.
Right.
And they would have all kind of had this look of shock in their eyes that they thought that they were the objective rulers of truth all this time. And here, a young 19-year-old has just changed their minds. They're like, oh my God. And they all for a moment kind of feel, I think it's sort of a humbling thing, not so much making them feel like idiots per se, but more a humbling thing,
Right.
Like, wow, we really screwed up on that one. That is on us. And that would be like an example for future programs, I suppose.
How would that have felt?
Especially because it was, How
would that have felt if they had said that?
I think I would have been at peace a lot more. And I would have had a lot more respect for them. Yeah. And sort of a sense of appreciation and more of a sense of humanness that sort of gets lost in professionals. They're so entrenched in professionalism that they forget that they're people.
Appreciation. That's a pretty big. That's a huge emotion, by the way. Appreciation. So when you're talking about feeling appreciation, you're talking about feeling something pretty high vibration.
Yeah, I think it'd be in a bit of a symbiotic relationship, like appreciation on both sides. Like, I appreciate that you had the ability to tell us that, and I'd be like, I appreciate you had the ability to look at that.
It's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that people who are coaches or therapists or whatever will suggest is forgiving, with the idea that forgiveness is not for the person being forgiven; it's for the person doing the forgiving to help release whatever it is that they've been hanging on to. And what the pruning shears of revision are kind of like an alternative. Instead of forgiving, it's reframing the scene to make it a more palatable and more interesting and emotionally acceptable scene. And I'm wondering, do you feel in any way similar to the way you might have felt if you had found a way to forgive them?
Like in this moment, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's sort of a sense of calm, like at the end of meditation or at the end of resolving some conflict with someone. Like it's kind of that sensation of like, I mean, exactly how I said it. Yeah, it's really interesting.
It's an amazing process, isn't it? Just even though we're just doing something in our own minds, just changing the way these two negative scenes played out. Isn't it interesting how it affects us? You're feeling affected right now. That's what you're trying to describe, the effect that it's having.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably tell just in the change in my voice.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which is a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I really appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Every episode is kind of like stumbling around, and then by the end, there's sort of some grand conclusion, at least for me. Solidifying you furthermore as a mentor, I'd say.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. But you make it easy for me, quite honestly, because you lay the stuff out, and then I suggest an alternative, and you go with it. I mean, that's a coach's dream. Most often, like a life coach or a therapist or whatever, most of the time they're struggling with their client, trying to get their client to get onto the path with them. You just go right into it. You make it really easy, so thank you. You make it very simple.
I don't, my dad mentioned that when I was young. He hasn't often, written cards, but there's one that I saved, and it was like, you have the rare ability to make your dreams become a reality. And to me, that was never really something that I ever actually thought about until later on, where I'm like, what? Like, how? Because a lot of the time in the moment, like I said, I'll feel like a complete failure, like I've not achieved anything. Then when I actually look back, it's like, oh, I've actually achieved almost, everything that I tried to do. It's just I got lost in the process of...
Here's a little more positive feedback for you then. Because Bronwyn posted in the comments, she says, Drew, you've done a great job with the path you were given. Be proud of yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And Nasha echoed it by saying, be proud, Drew, and be more cheerful, dear. That's such an achievement.
Well, thank you. That is, I guess, part of the journey I'm working on. So I might have to do this exercise in a different capacity tonight or something.
Keep doing it. Do it over and over again. Keep playing it over and over in your mind. Rewrite those scenes and other scenes, too. Because you've already seen how powerful it is to do that. Keep doing it. You're going to find it's going to produce amazing results for yourself. Make it a daily practice. You can even do it for the stuff that happened during the day. If something didn't go right during the day, change the way it played. Change it to the way you wish it had played out. It's amazing what it does when you do that.
All right, yeah, I've followed through on I think almost everything or at least the consistency has been the only thing. Like the replaying the day backwards, I've been doing that.
It's about just learning to redo it over and over and keep practicing. That's what it's about. But it's all right. Yeah. Anyway, we're about to wrap up here because we're out of time. But thank you for taking the time to do this and you were actually supposed to leave early and you didn't. So thanks for sticking around.
This was worth it.
All right.
I got to go though, so I will catch you later.
Absolutely.
And thank you everyone for your feedback and for listening.
And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.